much that on American Idol.
Definitely, I think that's the great thing about, I mean, a really sort of classic and timeless artist and songwriter is the universality of their themes, and I'd say for sure. I mean, and people used to bug him then, and they bug him now. Speak out against the Iraq War, speak out against the Vietnam War, which he didn't really do. And times he dodged it in interviews like the Nat Hentoff interview in Playboy in '66. But I think it speaks for itself, and the universality of that, the relevance of it, the power and the passion of it. So I mean, Masters of War could be about, unfortunately, the Obama administration, given what's going on with that crowd.
I think what he provides is a freedom that other artists then they take. It's like a mantle or relay race. I think what he says is be who you are and do what you want to do, and your voice will carry. Don't be afraid of the commercial monsters out there. Just go get it and go do it. And then I think that there's people that parlay that, into Jimi Hendrix on a guitar who's going to just flat out kick it. So people are going to now feel a freedom to express themselves. I think he provides some of that, because he said, again, I think this is true. He said, rock and roll is too lollipop, lollipop. I want to say something. And I think Hendrix says something. And I think the other artists behind him say something. I think Bruce Springsteen says something. Just let, life alone. They say, well, we're part of life. We're instrumental to life. We're going to play, we're going to sing our songs, and we're going to play the harmonica, and we're going to make it all fit together. And gives him freedom. He just gives him exactly what he thinks that the songs should be about, and people should be about it. Don't step on anybody else, but you should be free to, First Amendment's the most powerful amendment.
On music, well, I think that as a songwriter, he's, extremely interesting, and he's opened up, a number of new directions that people can take, and sort of, as somebody who was, people tend to look at him as sort of a signifier of his generation, or somebody who's speaking for that particular generation. But I think as a trailblazer for musicians and songwriters is where he's had probably more impact in the long run. He opened up a lot of, today we were talking about John Wesley Harding in our class, and that probably wasn't the first country rock album, but things like that make it more acceptable, that he has this sort of sneaky way of getting into people's ears, and from the beginning of an album to the end of the album, taking you on a progression where when the next one comes along, you're ready for it. That's happened a couple of times where the last track or the last couple of tracks on an album has been basically the bridge to the next thing. And he's really good about doing that and sonically taking you along for that ride.
I don't think his music so much has the same impact as it did then, his new albums, because what he was doing then was so unique and so true to the time that it can't really be, it's not really replicable now. But I think Dylan, as the legend, as the myth, as the master musician, definitely has an influence on upcoming musicians. Every person that buys a guitar learns Blowing in the Wind or The Times Are a Change, and he has like simple chords, and his music sounds good. His guitar sounds good, and it's relatively easy. So I think a lot of musicians start with him as the bass, and when you start with him as your bass, you never forget. So he's always in your mind. Yeah, I think his work has an impact in modern times because we're having a class on it right now. We're studying it right now, and it's important to know. Music is history, and it's important to, instead of reading about it in a book, you can listen to it. And it's very, very relevant to the times, and it's important to realize that and recognize the growth of music and where it's important to know where it's come from, and that is a good, and looking at the past is a good like stepping stone to realize like where it can go in the future and like the big possibilities that it can bring. And I think Dylan opened up a lot of possibilities for different avenues that music could go down. Yeah, of course. We have a war. We have a pointless war now, the same thing that we had then. People are treated really shittily now, like they were treated then. People are still in love. People still get killed. People fall out of love. People go through breakups. He's saying a lot about these things. Every situation that he's saying about then is the same now. Just instead of Vietnam, it's Iraq, it's Afghanistan, it's other places.
But I don't know. This is a different culture. There's a different. The music scene music still exists in people. It's just so diverse because of how many people and stuff. So it's just kind of like in the grapevines. It's in the seeds of things. And I guess that's what really everything kind of is. So, I mean, I guess it worked, right? We did it. I mean, I'm doing stuff. We're talking about it right now. So we're having that's kind of cool. It's just music, right? And
Interestingly enough, at Miles' show that night, I came across another musician who happened to have a few things to say about Bob Dylan.
What Family Fun really is about is appealing instantly to anyone that watches. I think anyone who enjoys any type of music is able to react positively to some sort of in-your-face screaming and hands-on experience is what we want to. I want to smash this bottle on the ground and just belly flop into it, and let everyone go, oh my god, I want that, oh my god, I want that reaction, and that's what we aim for. I don't think anyone could attribute their Bob Dylan influence on anything that's happened in the last 14 years, if not more than that. So, I think that in his time, it was huge, right? I think what he was doing was big, and that's what people can relate to. But today, it's sort of lost, and I think there are tons of people that are so able to do what he could do because of what he did back then. Bobby Dylan, Robbie Dill, as I call him, he's definitely an influence on us as hip hoppers, as electronic performers, as skull smashers. I think what he did sort of broke boundaries. I think Robbie Dill kind of brought this whole new world to the content of stuff, and that's what we try to do with our rap. And it's totally it's 4,000 miles away from Family Fun, but it's the idea of okay, this isn't hip hop, but it sounds like hip hop. And I think Robbie Dill is not folk music, but it sounds like folk music. I think he's actually Woody Guthrie, Bob Dylan. They're a message. They're power in something that is a vehicle for traditional song in America. They're not singing about potatoes. They're not singing about fucking grandma coming around the mountain and shit. They're saying something. That could be offensive to some, that moves people, that does stuff.
While almost everyone seemed to think his older work was quite profound, even today, I wanted to know what people thought about some of Dylan's more modern work.
And then, of course, he had the motorcycle accident. And I used to be of a mind that it was like he was James Dean all over again. That Bob Dylan, the Bob Dylan that I was crazy about, the guy that you couldn't pigeonhole, that was so interesting and unique and idiosyncratic and creative, died in that motorcycle accident. A different Bob Dylan came back. I dreamed I saw St. Augustine, Nashville Sky. It was like, what the heck is this stuff?
No, it has nothing like the same impact, because that's a social question in some ways. So, obviously Dylan is not, nobody's calling Dylan the voice of this generation. And he was only very problematically ever a voice of any generation.
I haven't listened to a lot of the modern albums. Like I said, I like Time Out of Mind. But discarding the basement tapes, which were recorded and then released later. I don't think I've listened to a single Dylan album all the way through, between, say, 73 and Time Out of Mind?
A lot. I have most of this. I have all the '60s albums, and I have a few sprinklings of the '80s. I have New Morning and Blood on the Tracks.
You know, like I said before, it's like 50 years. There are kids in high school who don't know that stuff, you know. And I'm not saying that's terrible. It's just, you know. So I feel like it does have an effect, but it's not like a fading thing. It's just kind of like what happens, you know.
But having said that, on the artistic level, yeah, I think some of his work does have the same kind of depth, the same kind of artistic punch. It's a little like reading early W.B. Yeats and later W.B. Yeats. They're not very similar, but they're both equally great. And particularly Time Out of Mind, and then a series of songs that Dylan recorded, I guess they would have been late 80s, early 90s, that just kind of floated around in various versions. Blind Willie McTell, Series of Dreams, Mississippi, Dignity. I think that you put those up against all but the very, very best songs of the 60s, and they hold their own for Dylan. And I think Time Out of Mind just flat holds its own with any album around. It's just a great statement.
I've gotten to that.
I hope the Christmas album disposes more people to doing stuff like that, because I mean that sure was fun, and it's sort of a play on, you know, like I said, I grew up listening to a lot of 60s music, and that included, you know, 60s Christmas albums, and those were huge back then. You know, almost everybody was, you know, so you'd have like Burl Ives, who's a folk singer, you know, and he wound up being the voice of the snowman in, what is it, Rudolph, or one of those, you know, and so people like that would record these Christmas albums, and I think that's sort of what he's playing around and making it okay to do again. And I just don't know if anybody it'll be interesting to see if anybody takes that sort of lead from him and says, okay, you know, we can have some fun with this, because you get tired of the same old stuff, you know?
So, and he's, even with his waxing and waning and Victoria's Secret and, you know, the China where he wouldn't sing Blowing in the Wind, and, you know, I'm always going to be at heart a Dylan fan because of, you know, 62 and 65, and especially that this was a guy that I felt helped me stay centered when I got out of the Army.
To conclude my interviews, I asked